Welcome to From Nothing to Profit, a photographer's podcast with Matt and Kaya, where each week they talk to photographers about what is working in their business now so you can swipe those ideas and grow your business faster.
Hey everybody, welcome back to From Nothing to Profit. So today's going to be a little bit different because Kaya and I have gotten some feedback and some of you listeners wanted to hear a little bit more from us. So Kaya and I came up with a theme today, which we're calling the money talk, because there's been a lot of questions sent to us about this. So we'll kind of go back and forth on these questions. But real quick, let me tell you guys the questions that people have been asking. So I'll just run through them real quick. So what do you guys decide to sell, or how do you guys decide to sell certain things? How do you price items and how do you deal with markup? Now that you've made money, how do you know what to spend it on? Which led into questions like, what are some really smart things to buy or use your money on? And then what are some dumb or irresponsible things to buy? What do you buy a lot of and shouldn't and should not buy? So that's like, what are our guilty pleasures that we're like really bad about buying? And then how do you do your bookkeeping? Because in some previous episodes, we talked about bookkeeping. So how do you do bookkeeping? And then there was a lot of questions around, some more questions around profit first and what that's done for our business. And then also some Dave Ramsey questions. So Kaya, I'm excited for this one. This should be definitely a good one.
Yes. I'm so excited to be here. And I think this is a question that works in great with the whole point of from nothing to profit is, what do you do with that profit and how do you create it? So I'm excited to be answering these questions today. I think it's going to be great.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting that people wanted to hear a little bit more from us because, we kind of designed it as this interview thing, but as we've been doing it for a while now, we realize like, well, yeah, I guess we do have a lot to offer as well. And people want to hear from us. So we'll sprinkle these type of episodes in here, especially around the new year here. We'll definitely get some in to talk about what we do around the new year and stuff as well. All right. So let me start with the first question, Kaya. So how do you go about deciding what to sell in terms of products and your business? Like, when you go to a trade show, how do you decide what to add, not to add? What do you decide? All those different questions.
Well, this is a great question because I think, some of the things are obvious. We sell portraits. And so the first thing that people used to ask about is how much are your 8x10s? And now the question that they ask are, how do I get the digital files, or do you include them in your session? And so I think every year I want to do a couple of things. One, I want to create actual session experiences that are new and different. And so sometimes that may include like going someplace specific or, making a really elaborate set for a children's session or, doing something like, adding hair and makeup for families or for seniors. So I think it all, for me, starts with the experience. And then on the product side of it, then there's so many different options that I like to be, experiment with it. But I also like to do things, especially for my business, that give my clients different things to put on their walls. And so, obviously with digitals, you can, offer like different treatments to the images. You can do like a vintage look or hand color or that type of thing, which we have done in the past. Although I don't think that's really in vogue right now. But then for me, I'm always thinking like, how can we create, new and creative ways to present the images on my clients' walls as art? And so that's one of the main things that I look for, is like frames that no one else has, or, ways to frame the images that's new and different from what I'm doing for my clients. And so one of the things that people are really liking is like acrylic wall portraits. So not necessarily the metals, but like images with acrylic on them. And so they are more like clear glass and a little bit more contemporary. So that's the direction we're going, is a lot of contemporary or super ornate.
That's really good. I've seen a lot of those acrylics, and we haven't added them yet. We saw them at one of the big trade shows maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, and they were just coming in. And I was like, well, that's something to keep an eye on, but I haven't circled back to it. So maybe that's something that we'll try this year as well. So.
Yeah. Well, let
Go
me
ahead.
ask you, Matt. So a couple more things. One of the things I like to do is like with specific sessions, if I do like a themed portrait session for children, a lot of times I try to create a product that goes along with it. So, I've done like a mud pie session and then done a frame with it that had like handprints in mud on the frame that then we lacquered.
Oh, that's really cool.
So, yeah, so creating products that actually go with themes or, get people excited. So let me ask you, Matt, what do you decide to sell? Like, how do you determine what products you guys do?
Yeah. So, I mean, we do something very similar. And I kind of think about it this way. Like we kind of pick a focus for a year maybe, and we really dive into something and really test a bunch of things out. So I think we're constantly testing, and I don't just test it for, like a quarter, like we're testing it for a year. So two things that we're testing right now and kind of had two different outcomes. One of them is standouts, which is basically just a wall art style where it's like printed on like foam core and it's like maybe an inch or 2 inches thick. And then they finish the edge either in black and white or stainless steel. I think some of the companies have like a light wood and a dark wood that they finish them, but it's just, so like the picture sticks out from the wall, but the edge is finished in something that's not a picture.
Yeah.
And so we tested those, and those really didn't sell in our studio. We moved them around our studios a couple different places, but they just didn't sell as well as like canvases and metals and image blocks and stuff like that. So that's something we tested, and they're probably on the way out this year. They'll probably be taken off our walls because they just didn't sell. I'm actually glad they didn't sell because they're one of the more expensive products to buy. And so because we sell all of our wall art kind of at the same price, it doesn't matter what finish you pick.
Yeah.
All of our 16 by 20s are all the same price. So that one had the least amount of margin in it. So I'm kind of glad that went away.
This is really way up on that one.
Yeah. So I'm kind of glad that one didn't work out as well. But one of the things that we tested that worked really well is image boxes. And so we did a lot in the last year around that. Basically, some kind of box that holds like 20 matted prints. And those sold really well. We brought in a ton of versions of them to see what sells. And we've already removed a couple that, just not to overwhelm our clients because they didn't sell from the very beginning. And then what we'll do here around the new year is actually go in and look and see which ones actually sell, what samples we need to keep out, because we want to keep it as simple as possible for our customers and also give them a variety at the same time. So we'll clean that up. And then that feels pretty good about, that's kind of wrapped up, and then we can just sell it for a couple of years until it kind of loses the energy and we have to revisit it. But we'll pick focuses. Like we'll say, okay, this year let's focus on wall art, and we'll really dive into all the different options. Or we'll say, let's dive into gift ideas or gift prints. Or one thing we've done before is like, what can we do for tabletops? And so we'll just dive into those and really, once you get focused and clear about it, you can find a lot of options, and then start, pricing them out and figure out what's going to be profitable, what's not going to be profitable. Because there's just some stuff in the industry that if you mark up a certain way, they just become so expensive that that's just there's sticker shock on them. They don't have the value, in the customer's eyes that is required to charge that much.
Yeah.
And so
they can't hold the value. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that also helps me decide whether I'm going to do something or not, is whether I can mark it up and make it worth the time to do it. Because there are some things that are...
So that's kind of the next question. That's the next question if you want to dive right into it. So like, how do you price and how do you mark up your stuff?
So typically what I do is I mark up things. So with photography, it's different. My dad had a furniture store, and so everything was marked up like double, essentially. And then if you did a sale on it or that type of thing, then you made less than double. And so that was a typical markup. Whereas photography, it's like 10 to 20% is what your cost should be. Because photography is not just a product, it's a service. And so a lot of the cost of the product is actually the time in creating it. Physically sitting at the computer, creating it, the time you work with them. And so I look for things that I can do 10 to 20% markup. But then I also have my digital products, which don't have any cost of goods. And so they will a lot of times offset things. So a lot of times I'll package digital and physical products together, where the physical product might have a higher cost of goods, but my digital has very little cost of goods. It's just more time. And then that gets me to my ideal markup. How about you?
And so just to clarify, so when you're saying like 10 or 20%, you're saying like if you pay $10 for something, you want to charge $100 for it.
Yes. Yeah. Because, and that's just, it sounds like an amazing markup. And a lot of people, when they start out, don't do that. And that's why photographers, I think, have such a hard time staying in business when they first start out, because they don't realize that you have to charge so much more for your time.
Yeah. And so we do something similar. Like, so we, this is kind of my baseline where to start, and then we adjust it. And I'll explain that in a second. But basically, yeah, we take the cost of the product that it costs to actually order it from the lab, and then like our time. So we'll budget like, okay, this product's going to take, X amount of time because it has 5 images in it. So it's going to take that much time in editing, and then, all the different time costs. And then we put a little bit of shipping in there just to save our butt if we have to ever ship it. And then what we do is once all that's bundled up, we kind of multiply it by 4, which is like kind of a 25% markup or 4 times markup. And that's kind of my starting point. And sometimes we don't even stick with that number, but like when I'm shopping at a trade show or whatever, I'll flip it over, look at the price and add some, retouching time and stuff into it and say, okay, I could sell this for $200. I could sell this for $1,000. And then it kind of says like, and then Alice and I both do that kind of separately. And then we'll take each other back to booths and I'll pick up something and I'll say, hey, can we sell this for $1,000? And her gut response will be yeah or no. And that kind of helps us narrow it down as well.
That's a really good way to do it, because I think sometimes I'll be like, there's no way anyone's ever going to buy this for this much. Just like you were talking about the standouts, we call them bamboos because we just put them only on bamboo.
Yeah.
And, when I first looked at them, I was like, people are not going to spend that money on it. And, but we have had a few people that did love them and did do it, but they were something that I would probably be like, meh, just looking at, they just don't look as expensive as they need to be.
Yeah. Cause I remember when bamboos first came out too, looking at them and thinking, man, like, this is me making up numbers, but like, this canvas costs $1 and this bamboo thing costs $7. Like, it's just like, that was like just crazy that the markup wasn't going to work,
Yeah.
But then one of the things that we do is we adjust it, right? If something's selling really well, we know we can raise the price a little bit, and we don't do that a lot, but like sometimes we underprice stuff. And so like we'll price something like at $400 and then we realize everybody's buying it. And it's like, well, okay, that's probably too cheap. Or we'll place something at like $1,200 and we realize, oh, it's not selling. So maybe it's the price. And so if we still believe in the product, we can drop it down to $1,000 and see if it sells. And sometimes there's just little price thresholds that you can hit where things do sell,
Yeah. And we also adjust ours based on how much time something takes. So for instance, an album may not cost as much, but the time to create and put together the album is, definitely cost prohibitive. So that's something that I would charge more for just because it takes so much more time involved in it too.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so let's move on to the next question because I think we covered that pretty good. So now that we've made the money or the photographer has made the money, like how do you know what to spend it on? Like how do you think about that?
Well, it's so funny because doing that profit first book definitely makes a big difference, but I actually have a list that I keep. And so for like specific equipment, for big events, things like that. And so once I know that I have a surplus, then I will spend it on those specific items. And I definitely, for me, I like to invest in new computers, new cameras, things that are going to make things go more smoothly. And then definitely, samples that I can show in the studio. So those are, the areas that I really like to invest in. And then education, I like to invest in that as well.
Yeah. And I definitely think education is one of the top of our list for sure. So we do the same thing. We make a list and then people are here was the nuance I figured out a couple of years ago that I thought was really good for our business. So we say this thing around our studio and we say a broke list is a better list. And when we mean broke, we don't mean like broken list. We mean like the list we made when we were broke, when we have no money is like the best list, because when you have money and you start making, a list when you have extra cash on hand, like it's amazing what gets thrown on there. I just like stuff we'll never use, like we own like a Lens Baby, little lens. And it's one of those things that we bought that was not on the list, that we bought when we had extra money, and we've used it like 3 times, so that would have never made the list if we would have made the list when we were in our slow season and had no money. Mm-hmm. So start to make your to-do or your to-buy list when you don't have money, so that when you do have money, you know exactly what you wanted, because it's just a different mental exercise.
It's like going to the grocery store after you've had lunch rather than when you're starving.
That's exactly what it's like.
Yeah.
So what are some of the smart things that you think people should buy when they have extra money, or things that they should invest in? You already said a couple, but any others that you want to add?
I think things that will make you money. So for me, if one of the things that I like to buy are props. So for me, like backgrounds, chairs, things like that. And so if I know, like each year I do a Saint Nick set. Mm-hmm. And so if I know that I can use it all year long, besides just doing it for the Saint Nick set, then I'll invest. So I might buy a pair of like vintage doors that are like $1,000 or $2,000, which seems crazy, but I will for sure pay it off with the actual sessions that I do. And then if I can use it for years to come, then it's a smart thing to buy, even though it's a super expensive item. What about you?
Right, definitely repurposing stuff.
Yeah.
So I think probably one of the smartest things that we have bought over the years is really big samples. And I think I gave this example maybe in one of our previous podcasts, but we just went to like a local expo, as like a women's expo.
Yeah.
And there was like a ton of photographers there. There was probably like 5 or 6 photographers there. And we brought these huge, like 30 by 40 canvases. So when people were walking by, they were like, wow, like they made an impact. And those things also hang in our studio every day. And a lot of the other photographers had some kind of 8 by 10 wall or something like that, because that's just what they sell. And they hadn't taken the time to invest into wall samples. And so one of the things is like, when we have extra money, it's like, okay, let's do a big display, to test a product, but also to see if it sells. And sometimes, you put 20 by 30s or 30 by 40s on your wall so that you can sell, you can sell 16 by 20s or 20 by 24s. If you just put 11 by 14s and 8 by 10s on your wall all the time, you're just going to sell what people see. So
we just did that, invested even in bigger ones. So we put a 40 by 60 in, mm-hmm. and then a 40 by 40 and a 30 by 40 and a 30 by 30. And the plan is not necessarily to sell those every day, but they're now, since people see them, you could sell them, but they also just say something different about how you display pictures. Yes. Well, what's interesting is immediately since then, I put them up maybe a month ago, and my 30 by 30 has 4 smaller, like 12 by 12s around it. And I was looking at our orders with our clients, and someone did exactly that with their order. So the same exact layout. And then I looked at another client, and they did rather than just, because some of them are not just one single portrait of a family. It's a grouping of big prints on the wall.
Yeah, we do a lot of groupings. Yeah.
And so another one did, there was a gunmetal frame color. And so they did multiple big portraits in the gunmetal frame color. And so I've realized that those immediately took effect in our orders.
Yeah. And so that's exactly what we've seen too. So that's something that we do. And then, like I said, the repurpose idea is that then you go to a trade show or something, you take them with you, and people just are blown away, because your booth is, 10 by 20, and then you try to put an 8 by 10 in there, and, 10 by 20 feet, and then you put an 8 by 10 and nobody notices. But I see a lot of photographers where their biggest thing at their trade show is their banner. And that's probably not the best idea. Yeah. Your banner should be there so they know who you are, but your prints should be grabbing people to pull them in.
Yeah. Oh, that's a really good idea of what's smart to buy. Okay, so now I get to ask this question.
Okay.
What are dumb things that you buy?
Okay, so this isn't for us. We've been really disciplined, but I'll tell you why we don't do this. So to me, it's camera gear. Not because I don't think you should invest in camera gear, because you said it well a minute ago. Invest in camera gear to make things go more smoothly, so then you reduce time and friction, and that's profitable for your business.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people just buy camera gear that they don't really need. And unfortunately, what happens is I think they relate that camera gear to confidence. And so they're spending thousands and thousands of dollars just to have confidence in their business. And I just don't think it's that smart, because I don't think in the end buying a new lens or upgrading from a 1.4 to a 1.2 is going to move the needle for a lot of people. Now, there are equipment, like if you don't have super high equipment and it's holding you back, that's one thing. Like, for example, if you're photographing weddings and then you can never focus at the reception because your camera just doesn't have good low light focusing, that's different. Like, that's holding you back from the reception.
Yeah.
But if you're already having clients spend money and you're shooting with, an 85 1.8, do you really need to spend, $2,000 to get the 1.4? Because are your clients going to even notice? Is it going to move the needle? Are you going to get higher sales because of it? And the answer for most people is no. And I see it on Facebook all the time this time of year, where people are like, okay, I just got out of my busy season. What camera gear should I buy? And it's like, you should probably go to a conference, or you should probably, order wall samples before you ever order that extra lens.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I think are dumb things to buy. And the reason I say we're pretty good about that is because Alice and I met at a camera store, and I used to be a camera salesperson. So I know the game that the companies play with you in terms of upgrading to get you to upgrade all the time. And it's very seldom are those, big landmark moves that actually make your life a lot easier.
Okay.
So what are the things that you think are silly to buy?
I want to know what you spend money on that are dumb things, because I think that's a great answer about the camera gear, but this is true confessions time, Matt.
Okay. So then this leads into the next one. Like, what are things I buy that I shouldn't buy?
Okay.
Yeah. So they kind of go together. So I left it blank until I went home and talked to Allison last night. And so she was like, she knew exactly what the two things were. Because, it's one of those things, like, sometimes you're not self-aware of yourself.
Uh-huh.
So the two things that she told me, she said, Matt, you're terrible at buying too much software.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, I buy a piece of software that does one little thing that it's cool and it's fancy, but it doesn't necessarily move the needle in our business.
Uh-huh.
And then the other thing that she said that we're both really bad about is when we do like bulk printing, and you're in that situation where you're like, okay, I can print 25 for $1 a piece, and I can print 50 and they go down to 98 cents. And then I can buy 500 and they go down to 74 cents, and it just scales up.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you order like 4,000 of something that you really only needed 25 of to begin with.
Yeah.
And then they just sit there forever. Like, so, 8 years ago, we printed a baby plan flyer and we ordered like over 1,000 of them. And that baby plan flyer is still sitting there. I mean, we sent them out, but we didn't ever use all of them. So
you over order on like, I don't know what it's called when they make it cheaper. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I call it like bulk printing.
Yeah.
And you only need 25, but you order 100 because it's a little bit cheaper. And so that's where we spend. That's where they always get us. So
yeah. So you have a problem going into Costco then, huh?
Yeah. I don't go to Costco.
Me neither. I'm scared of that store.
I'm like, who doesn't need a life-size wine glass, like, and a 6-foot teddy bear to go with it? Who doesn't need this? Put it in the cart.
It's a good thing. If I took my children, we'd be in so much trouble there.
Yeah. Okay. So what are the things that you think are, I don't necessarily like the word dumb to buy, but let's just call it that, or things that you have bought that you just like, I wish I wouldn't have.
Overdo it. Okay. Well, I think, so I think the first answer was like, what do you see people doing that you think is kind of an unwise use of their money? And I would say that what I see that concerns me is when people jump on the bandwagon of someone else and they see someone else being super, doing really well at some thing. So, just like Sue Bryce with her boudoir, and they jump in and they're like, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be that person. Or they see, these newborn photographers and they're like, I'm going to be the best newborn photographer. And so they buy all the things to be like that person. They buy all the equipment, all the backgrounds, all, whatever education they're selling. And they jump in to try to be someone that they're not. And I'm not pointing fingers at anyone specifically. It's happened for years. There was one guy who was super into like making people, like when you could very first like be able to paint in Photoshop,
right?
Or Corel Painter, and they would like take a like tool around people and then like paint to look like they were kind of like floating on the background.
Mm-hmm.
everyone was so into it. They were like, this is the thing. And everyone started trying to do that. And that was their thing. And so I think when you invest money in trying to be someone that you're not, that always concerns me, because I feel like people have like piles of, backgrounds and sets and educational materials, lenses, whatever, that aren't really who they are.
Yeah. And I see the same thing with equipment. Like you'll see some photographer become really famous and they may shoot like a pro photo, like B1 or something, a $2,000 strobe, and they're amazing. They really are. But they're already shooting maybe like an Alien B, and it's like, okay, going from an Alien B to that $2,000 B1, is it really going to move the needle in your business just because another photographer said that's what they use?
Yeah. If you know for sure that it will, if you're like, this is the thing I've been looking for and I've researched it, then I think it's great to purchase that. I think it's just what I see is people who just don't really know who they are. And so they're chasing someone else, trying to be like someone else's, what someone else is successful at.
Yeah, I see that all the time as well. Okay, so now you have to do your true confession. Like, what is it that you...
Oh, my true confession is props and backgrounds. So anytime I'm in a store, at a vintage store, just the garage sale, I will screech to a halt, jump out of the car and buy whatever the thing is. So I end up with a lot of stuff, and you can ask Andy, our garage is full, like we can't put our cars in, and it snowed. Today is like the 4th time it's snowed. It never snows this much in Kansas. And I know that he's just grinding his teeth at me every time he can't park his car.
Because he's scraping the snow off of his windshield.
But I'm like, we can't move this stained glass piece and this, box and all these things. So yeah, it's definitely props and backgrounds and chairs and, the feathers for something. It's just always, it translates into sales and sessions. But at the same time, I also just end up with a bunch of junk. And so rather than really carefully, I'm working really hard at carefully thinking out whether or not I buy things.
And I've seen this happen firsthand because we've been at Sync together before, where we've gone to like lunch together.
You've seen me do this?
Yeah. Well, and so it's like lunch, these are in quotation marks. And so we go to lunch and we have lunch, and then you're like, oh, there's a store right there. I got to go to that store. And then 3 stores later, we're still like, now we're like 3 blocks away from the car. And lunch was like 2 hours ago. And we're like, we should probably go back to the hotel now.
I don't feel like I'm a long shopper. I'm a quick decision maker.
Yeah. And I haven't seen you really buy anything, but you're like, here's an opportunity to find something really cool and unique. And you're like all about it. So.
Yes. Yeah. I like to look and think and figure out how I'm going to do it. And it just makes me so mad if I go back to the store and it's gone. I'm so offended. I'm like, someone took my stuff.
That's so funny. Okay. So the next question, talk a little bit about how you do your bookkeeping, any insight or how you think about bookkeeping, because we got a lot of questions from the audience about that.
So, I use StudioCloud right now. I am interested in, there's another one out. I've been looking at it online. It's like Honeybee or...
Oh yeah. Honeybook or something like that?
Yeah. I'm looking at that. I think that's interesting. And so I use StudioCloud for like invoicing and scheduling and that type of thing, but I don't use it for like actually doing my books. And so I transfer everything to QuickBooks and I do all of that myself. And then I do all my own payroll. So before I started doing my own business, that was one of my roles in our family business, was doing all of the bookkeeping. And I like it. I'm a math person. And so I like that, the numbers and thinking about it. And I like putting money into savings, and I like seeing that grow. And so, that's how I do it. I do all of it myself. How about you?
So we don't do it ourselves. So we have in the past, we used to have Successware years ago before it no longer worked on modern Macs.
Oh yeah. I've used Successware too. Yeah, back in the day.
Yeah, and it was great, and so it really helped us grow our business because we could see numbers and stuff. But when we very first started, the very first year, Allison, you tried to do QuickBooks herself with our accountant, and she would just cry, like literally cry. She hated it so much. So we went away from it and we went to Successware. So then when Successware finally ran its course, we had to go back to something, and she was like, well, I guess I could do it. I can figure out QuickBooks. I'm like, no. We've been here. We've done this. So we hired a bookkeeper, and our bookkeeper just puts everything into QuickBooks for us and then gives it to our CPA. And it's like $120 a month. So it's not crazy, and the amount of time and energy it saves Allison is worth every penny. So, so we just have a bookkeeper now that does QuickBooks for us. But here's what happened. I'll just give people some insight when you hire a bookkeeper is you lose the vision into your numbers because you're not doing them.
Yeah.
So you have to be super careful. And that's one of the reasons why we started doing profit first. And we'll talk about that. But you have to know not necessarily every nuance of your numbers that your bookkeeper is doing for you, but you have to know like key performance indicators. And so some of the KPIs that we follow in our business to make sure that we know what's going on in our bookkeeping and what's going on in our business is like we track how many leads we have, how many consults we did, how many sessions we did, like what our average sale is, and then how many referrals are things that we keep track of because we know that those move the needles. It's not necessarily how much money got spent in this little bucket that the bookkeeper put together, but it's more like, what does matter to us and what can we track. But be careful if you outsource your bookkeeping because you will lose visibility into your numbers big time.
Well, I think that you definitely can lose visibility into your numbers, but if you don't do your own bookkeeping and you just slapdash it, which I think a lot of people do, then you're better off using a bookkeeper than not doing anything.
That's true. That's absolutely true.
I'll talk to people and I'm like, so tell me your numbers. Tell me how many sessions you've done. Tell me what your average is. And a lot of times people just don't know. And I read a book. I bet you've read this one too. Good to Great.
Mm-hmm,
Have you read that years ago? Yeah. And one of the things he talks about is just knowing, like forcing yourself to know the dirty secrets, or I can't remember what his wording is, but essentially like deal with the facts, deal with the the scary facts. And I think sometimes you just don't want to know your numbers. You don't want to balance your checkbook because then you're going to have to deal with your decision making. And so for me, I do it, I do it several times a month. And then I also use Digit, which is a way to like save money. It takes out like a different percentage every day and puts it in a savings account. And I don't save a whole lot into that, but what it does is it sends me my balance of my account, my main checking account for the business every single day. And so that's just one little thing that keeps a tab on it for me so that I'm like, ooh, a bunch came out, or, oh, a bunch came in, and I can, pay attention to it. So I'm not, so I see that number every day, even though I don't necessarily sit down and do bookkeeping every day.
Right. And the other thing that made me think about when you're talking about this, that relates to what you said earlier about somebody like chasing other people and, buying stuff because they want to be like somebody else. The other thing is I see like the only key performance indicator that people really care about is average sale. They don't track leads or consults or sessions or referrals, and they only care about what their average sale is. And that seems to be the number that people tout around to other photographers, that my average sale is $1 billion. And it's just that I just don't think that's
one.
Right. I just don't think that's a good way to do it because that doesn't tell the whole story. So just be careful. And here's the other thing I see all the time. I've seen this with a number of people I've gotten to know, and it's thoroughly disappointing, is they may say like, oh, my average is $3,000. And then you actually find out that they're not tracking like the zeros, or they're not tracking the duds that were like the $500 sales. Yes. They just remove all the stuff they don't want to admit happened. And then it's like, then my average is $3,000. And then you find out it's like, not even that. It's like, $2,000. So I think people just need to be really careful about that. That's a side note from bookkeeping, but just you got to be careful with that.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've been doing Profit First for a couple weeks, I guess a couple months, since I mentioned to it at the very beginning of the podcast. So tell me what's going on with it.
Well, it's been a really good time to start Profit First because this is the time of year when our business makes profit. So it has been fun to watch the profit accounts grow. And I think the thing for me is I'm just like, I really am going to have to see it play out over a year of time. But I think what is going to happen for me with Profit First is I've allocated money into accounts, for taxes and for the slow season, paying wages and that type of thing. But I haven't done it really based on the actual amount that I've just done it because I'm like, okay, this probably will cover that. And so I've done more guesstimation.
Yeah.
With Profit First, you figure your actual percentages of what you bring in, and that, if you do a similar amount of business to the year before, then your percentages should have you saving the money and putting it in the accounts that you're going to need it for. So I think long term, it's going to make me feel so much more confident. And I'm starting to feel confident, but then I'm kind of nervous because I'm not doing it the same way I've done it before. And so I'm like, okay, does this look a little bit like what I've done in the past, so that I make sure that I have the money I need when I need it?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So just to clarify with people, so Profit First is a book that we'll link in the show notes, but it's basically a book to help you figure out how to budget your money in your business. And it's something that Alice and I have done for like a year, and Kaya's now done for a couple months. But it's a whole system, how to start from where you are and then build a very profitable business. And so we're both on that journey. And so we just got to a point where we were like, a couple months ago, we were feeling super confident and it was awesome and everything was good. And then like our busy season came and I realized our percentages were off a little bit, not in a bad way, but now we just have a lot of money allocated towards paying ourselves, which will be good when the slow season comes. But it definitely was like, oh, this feels different because now we don't have as much money in our operating expense account.
Yes.
And so it's like, yeah, we actually see what happens in the busy time and the slow time, but it's one of those things that sometimes you'd just rather not know. So it's a journey for us too, because we're just now finishing our first year of it, and it's definitely been ups and downs. Overall, it's been a hugely positive thing for our business, but it's been interesting, just. It's just been interesting.
Right now, you don't have this big surplus in your operating account that you would normally.
Yeah, because our tax account is full and ready to pay our taxes, which has never happened. That used to be in our operating expense account. We have all of our wages set aside for the slow season. That used to be in our operating expense account. So at this point, we used to have tens of thousands of dollars in our operating expense, and now we don't, because it's allocated to the right spots. But it makes you realize like, oh, I really didn't have as much money as I thought. And we always knew that, because come like March, you realize you didn't have as much money, but we're seeing it ahead of time. And that's a different feeling than seeing it in hindsight.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, we would probably benefit doing a whole show on Profit First and Dave Ramsey in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, this has been fun to hear how you think about how you're spending money, and just doing a whole money talk. This has been really interesting.
Yeah, it has been fun. So guys, we'll try not to bore you too much with just having Kaya and I talk, because we don't necessarily want it to be the Matt and Kaya show, but so we'll bring lots of interviews, and we got a lot of people lined up over the next couple of months to do stuff with us. But we'll try to do these every once in a while, just to sprinkle in some insight into what we're doing. So thanks everybody for joining us, and we will see you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to From Nothing to Profit, a photographer's podcast with Matt and Kaya. Be sure to subscribe for more business strategy and ideas to help you create the profitable and successful business you've always wanted. See you on the next episode of From Nothing to Profit.